Dr. Sanjeev Singh. So, I mean, it's my privilege to introduce him. He was my mentor earlier. So, Dr. Sanjeev Singh is a pediatrician by training, and he has done his master's in hospital administration and PhD in infection control. Currently, he's heading 2,500 bedded hospital in Faridabad as a medical director for Amrita Institute of Medical Sciences and Research Center. He has done his fellowship in patient and healthcare work safety from University of Virginia and fellowship on health technology and assessment from University of Adelaide. He's a faculty of IIM and at IIM Bangalore. He's an international surveyor at ISCO. He was a technical committee for NABH for developing standard or drafting standard for third and fourth edition. Currently, he's a vice chairman of research committee at NABH, and he's a chairman of technical committee at HPI and Health Sector Council of India. So welcome, sir. And I'll just leave it to you. I mean, I'll hand it over to you for taking a topic on patient-reported outcome measure, which is definitely, very, very important topic for us. And it is first time come in India by NABH. So we all want to know how to measure it and what tools to use. Thank you, sir. You can start.
Thank you, Rashmi. Quickly go over to the topic which has been given to me, which is patient-reported outcome monitoring and PRIM. And as rightly said by Rashmi, this is a new tool which has been now been written in NABH standards, and it's a new entry, new quality initiative. Nevertheless, been done for almost 2 decades at various institutions and continent. So quickly, let's talk about what I'm going to speak. So change is, it's very difficult, and various institutions have their own baggages, and various stakeholders bring in lots of baggages from various institutions. So it's going to be difficult, and that's how the patient experience and outcome also becomes sort of difficult, but then it is one of those best practices. And we quickly also look at the methodology and the monitoring mechanism and what results sort of could be achieved. And I'm thankful to Angelina, who came in 2017 and guided us in establishing PROM from International Hospital Healthcare Confederation of Outcome Monitoring, ICOM. So what generally happens is that the patient is when he's sick, he or she is sick, they come to the hospital, and this is general pathway of a patient who comes to the hospital. They undergo a procedure, they are shifted to the post-op or a high dependency unit, and then they go through a rehab, nutrition treatment, they get discharged, the patient reaches home. And the connect which is established with all these patients is the note which is called as discharge summary. And that's how they sort of adhere to most of the things which is there. But during this, there are gaps. Now, gap is that there are no clinical handovers, at least in low middle income countries. Patient is falling sick and he reaches out to the hospital, and when they go back, when they are discharged, they go back into the society. So there is no handing over which is happening. There is also no longitudinal follow-ups, because the patient may be asked to review after 3 weeks or 3 months, and there are no the continuous follow-up of these recordings which are generally there, and that's possibly one of those drawbacks. But what is also important and it is missing is there is no system of patient experience recording post-discharge. So the discharge is a good timestamp, and if the patient has done well, it is recorded as a successful surgery, and we don't know how well it has been there. We also know that there are communication challenges. Whenever a patient reaches out in the outpatient department or in an inpatient, we interrupt the patient who's telling his or her story every 23 seconds. We generally don't include 50% of what has been told to the physician or the surgeon in the room, because we tend to negate and we jump to our own judgments and conclusions. We don't inform And we take less than 1 minute in getting all those prescriptions. And we have done this study through our pharmacy college, and when they went to a home health, and they realized that 42% of the patients in the state of Kerala, which is 99% literate, don't adhere to some of those recommendations which are there on the prescriptions. And there is a white coat syndrome where we intimidate people, and then they have 10 questions when they walk into the room, but they are so intimidated they're only asking 2 or 3. So the shared decision making doesn't generally happen. So the co-designing of the discharges or the patient care is interrupted. So the International Confederation of Health Outcome Monitoring, ICOM, with Harvard Business School, they came up with order sets and said that it is just not the physician or the surgeon who decides that my solid organ transplantation success rate is 96%. That's not good enough. Or the total knee replacement success rate is 99%. Because it is still the surgeon and the physician dependent. So why can't we have the patients decide how good is the surgery? And then there are parameters. And that's how the value-based purchasing and the NHS and Center for Medicare and Medicare would do the reimbursements. And it was quickly adopted by UK National Quality Forum, and they also released a document on PROM and PREM, and they realized that it is an important tool. So this is a gentleman called Dr. Ernest Codman. Remember the year 1917, almost 100 years back, from Harvard Medical School. And this general surgeon went ahead and formed the American College of Surgery and Joint Commission Accreditation for Healthcare Organization, JACO, which is popularly known as JCI. He said almost 100 years back that a common sense notion is that every hospital should follow every patient it treats long enough. That's the criteria, long enough to determine whether or not the treatment has been successful. And this is what we don't do, because it's only the timestamp is only the discharge. And if he's good enough, we take them as recovered. And then he came up with an end result audit where he used to introspect all surgical procedures which he has done and collect a huge bit of data. But definitely his peers did not like it, and then he was thrown out of our medical school. And we know that if you challenge the work of peers, it's generally is difficult. So it is just not there, but a fantastic article came in by Michael Porter, and I think every one of you would know who Michael Porter is, who basically initiated this whole concept of PROM and PREM and published this in NEJM, mentioning that standardizing of the patient outcome, because it's good that the patient participate, but then how would it happen? How would it look? So they basically put in a formula where value of patient's information is equal to outcomes divided by cost. So if the outcome is good, and if you are able to give it at the low cost and longitudinally for long enough, you are able to sort of follow a particular patient, that would be, I think, an excellent work done. So there are various ways, yet how do we fix these values? And the various people have various definitions. So some of them, they say that the value is put qualitatively through reputation. Some of them say that it is basically the survival rate. If the hospital is busy, that's a good hospital. If you're doing some of the quality indicator and maintaining it well, that's a good hospital. But nobody basically is tracking outcomes, whether the patient who came in and has with the poor incontinence improved, bowel functions, and various recurrences of the diseases. So different people have different ways of defining outcomes, and that is where ICOM sort of chipped in to understand the meaningful use. But then what they decided is, and they published in Tracking Medicine in 2010, is there are some acute complications of the treatment which could be gauged by mortality and readmissions. There are some patient-reported health status which would come from either the pain, physical functioning, work status, quality of life issues, and overall satisfaction. And then there are disease-based, whether a reoperation, need for surgery, or progression of and utilization, or the care which was provided to the patient was rational and appropriate. So that is how they define what the value is, and it was basically made very uniform and standardized. And we also know that various countries have their own mechanism of putting this together. So you know that there would be a 5-year survival rate. And then you would either have it at 94, 95%. And then you know that if you are doing a patient is coming up with a CA breast, where you have done a surgery followed by chemo, radiation, or a combo therapy, the survival rate is close to 95%. So, and that's how you recommend the various surgical followed by therapeutic procedures. But at various levels, 1-year incontinence, erectile dysfunction is different in different countries. And that is how it is just not about few measures which has been taken as outcome. It is about putting a meaningful outcome indicator and uniformly measure across the country. So recent articles also highlight the variations of the outcomes in the joint replacement surgery. And there was more than 4-fold difference in risk standardized complication rate in US hospitals. Approximately 1/3 of TKAs are judged to be inappropriate. And those are very, very remarkable recommendations, which was published in Arthritis and Rheumatology in 2014. 1/3 of knees have been inappropriately fixed. So how do we decide that? How do we rationalize a good indication, or we would only go by a surgical treatment? The percentage of hip replacement that are revisions procedure is just over 14%. This probably equates to revision rate of 20 to 25%. And the revision rate for Sweden is 7%. So they have done remarkably well. And that's how different countries have different ways of doing surveillance, capturing data. And many of these Scandinavian countries have gone ahead and they have sort of tracked the patient's outcomes pretty well, and also demonstrated rational therapies. So will we be only based on surgeon's outcome, or we can also ask patients to participate in any of the therapies? So this is a good work which was done by, which was published in an Indian Journal of Arthroplasty by Dr. Raju. Does the surgeon's reported outcome correlate with the patient reported outcome? So he looked at 306 replacements and was evaluated with on a format which is called as Knee Society Knee Score, or Functional Score, or Oxford Knee Score, and that's how it got correlated. But then it also said that there is no significant correlation between American Knee Society or Oxford Knee Score in osteoarthritis patient in midterm follow-up. It signifies acceptable outcome may vary between patients and physicians. So this is a bit of contrary view, which is there, but then overall there is a remarkable impression which has been created. So it is just not about knee replacements and CABGs or cesarean sections. PROM is, there are many order sets, and ICOM along with the Harvard Business School have put in together almost 44 disease profile PROM instruments. And those are basically quality of life index score sheets, which have been sort of verified and validated and now put in use. So it could be there for rheumatoid arthritis, for bariatric surgery, for Alzheimer's, it could be for diabetes, multiple sclerosis, and epilepsy. So there are various tools which are available, and that is how you would put it all together. Now, there are some additional resources which I think the team should also know, that there are psychological general well-being index, So if you're looking at Alzheimer's, if you're looking at the chronic disease profiles with paraplegic, quadriplegic, and those who have been sort of on bed for quite some time with the urinary and fecal incontinence, there are various well-being index which also could be managed. So there are other disease specific like rheumatoid arthritis quality of life questionnaire. So you cannot just use any quality of life questionnaire while managing PROM and PREM. So there are dimension specific, which is also physical activity index. There are region or site specific, which is an example is Cambridge Pulmonary Hypertension Outcome Review. There are individualist patient instruments which could be used, like schedule for evaluation of individual quality of life. And then there are various utility-based services which also could be gauged, like for major, unipolar, and bipolar cases. So what I'm trying to address here is that there is a lot of work which has been done, and administering a quality of life questionnaire is not PROM and PREM, which I have seen in many parts of the world, but it is very disease specific and very individual patient specific or dimension specific or site specific questionnaire, which is used to evaluate PROM and PREM. Now let's look at why it all got started, because there isn't a shared decision making, and including in our institution, because we believe that it's a not-for-profit and it's a medical institution where you have JRs and SRs and the faculty, along with an intention that there is a mentoring and teaching, but then the shared decision making and a patient-centered care is definitely missing. So there is a 6D model looking at the outcomes like death and disease, disability and discomfort, dissatisfaction, and cost of treatment. And basically, if you could administer two quality of life analysis like PROM and PREM, it manages almost every bit of outcome analysis which is there in the world. It monitors morbidity, mortality, the epidemiological parameters, it monitors quality of life parameters, it monitors the experience and the delight factor, it also monitors the quality of life issues. So what did we do at Amrita is looking at the qualitative and the quantitative aspect. We introduced PROM and PREM for our antibiotic stewardship program in 2 surgical departments, GI and cardiovascular. We looked at orthopedics, we looked at cardiovascular, thoracic surgery, critical care, and bariatrics, and we have done this since 2017 to 2019. And post-COVID, there has been a lot of limitations of capturing that kind of an information. So what did we do? It is at the time of discharge, post-discharge, we follow up with all the patients, 3 months post-discharge, 6 months post-discharge, and 1 year post-discharge. And we threw this questionnaire to all of them. And we have a beautiful team of very competent team of medical social worker, which basically reaches out, and there is a good connect. They round with the clinical team and they establish that connect. And before the patient is getting discharged, they are introduced to this concept, and that is how they call up and do a video call, or when they come back to the hospital, they review. So there is a mobile app which is also present in a vernacular language, where they also feed in all this information, and then it is centrally collected and registered to understand how the patient has been doing on a quality of life analysis. So there is a tool which is called as KOOS and WHOOS, which is used in orthopedics, which we also use. That is the knee injury and osteoarthritis outcome score, and hip injury and osteoarthritis outcome scores. And this is a very comprehensive tool which is introduced to the patient when they get discharged. There is another tool which is used for cardiac sciences, that is EQ5D5L, which looks at the mobility, self-care, activities, pain, discomfort, anxiety, and depression. The intention again is that you need to select the cases appropriately. You need to perform the surgery as per the right competencies, and then you also follow up the patient so that they sort of recover well and they are able to have a meaningful contribution to their life and to the society. So looking at all the parameters which are critical. There's a patient feedback monitoring mechanism where they are not asked about how the diet was and how the discharge process was and how the parking or the access to the hospital was, but looking at is the faculty and staff and the stakeholders when they brief, do they make you feel at ease? Do they let you tell your own story, or do they interrupt? Do they really listen? Are they interested in you as a whole, or basically they are only interested to listen as nausea, vomiting, or they are also listening at lack of sleep for last 1 month and look at solutions, fully understand your concern, showing care and compassion, being positive in the explanation and the counseling which is being done, and explaining things clearly and helping things to be understood. So this is a good tool, an ethnographic qualitative tool, which is called a sociogram. And we realized, we published this particular work. We also realized that when the rounding happens, this is the patient who's lying on the bed, and then there are various faculty and staff who comes on the round. The head of department gets most of his information from the surgical resident who was not there on the night duty but has taken the handover, and then the surgical resident also does the communication. Most of it comes from the nurse who is the bedside nurse for this particular patient. And then there are various communication channels, like if there are instructions which has been given, there are general information, there are some casual conversation, which is all being tracked. And just to understand whether are the communications appropriate and are they linked to the outcomes. And then this post rounding, the patient has been asked whether how was he able to tell his story, and whether everything what was communicated has been appropriately understood. But what you realize here is again a very hierarchical way of treatment, that is head of department communicating and rest of them, they still are muted spectators. We also realized that in the different department, which is gastrointestinal surgery, it's a very Western concept of being patient-centric hospital. But in India and low middle income countries, and I propose that it is very, very different, because having used sociograms, it is a carer-centric and then a patient-centric. Because in India, carer plays a very, very important role to tell the patient's story and also communicate it back to the patient. And so there are lots of channels of communication. And we also realized during this channel that antibiotic stewardship or antibiotic prescription and infection prevention is not discussed during the rounds. So this is about the behavioral change. And then there are tangible results which comes up from the compliance and the morbidity and mortality. So this is how the data has been captured, where total knee replacements and total hip replacements are done. But what is important is looking at the activity of daily living, recreational and pain, and looking at when you apply WHO's and KOOS scoring, that it actually improves significantly. We also looked at hip arthritis and activity of daily living and recreation. And then there is a significant 450% improvement in activity of daily living, recreations, and reduction in pain. The similar story was there in critical care, where we looked at Apache 2 and Apache 4 and predictive mortality and standardized mortality ratio. All the patients who were followed up on the EQ5D scoring, activity of daily living and recreational scores did improve in all these patients. And that is how the PROM and the PREM intervention and administration would work. And it has really 300% improvement in all aspects of its its line items. In cardiovascular thoracic surgery, looking at patient functional daily living and recreational score and visual analog and quality of life. When we implemented PROM, it again improved to close to 250 to 300% in functional daily living, recreational, reduction in visual analog and quality of life issues. We also did some work with Harvard Business School and looking at heart failures. And when you basically discharge the patients on ACE inhibitor, we thought the Department of Cardiology would be doing it on all 100% of the patients. But when you check with the patients, it is only 50%. And the salt and water intake should, again, the advice should be for 100% of the cases, which is 43%. And then you go back and improve these therapeutic and diagnostic information and look at the outcomes. So impact for bariatric surgery on quality life has also been studied, and then looked at various questionnaires of their improvement pre and post surgery. So finally, does this make any economic sense? So all-cause mortality was decreased by 4%, length of stays improved by 0.5 days, patient experience enhanced, the diagnostics definitely improved. So when you looked at the cost benefit, it is close to 1.61 CR plus the opportunity cost within an institution, which is very significant. So to conclude, PROM and PREM are good disruptive tools. It is integrating them with clinical practice and as a quality improvement initiative will make it as a very comprehensive care. Care-centric and patient-centric is a new blockbuster drug, and that's how they need to be sort of inculcated and introduced within the system and at the time of discharge and follow these patients. We need to track all the functional outcomes and looking at the quality of life post discharge with a longitudinal follow-up. So PROM and PREM, they are excellent tool, and gone are the days where we are only dependent on surgeon-based success rates. Now the patients equally participates and brings in that perspective. So thank you so much.
That, can we use any self-prepared tool for PROM? Or how can we decide on data collection duration and frequency? So
there needs to be, you cannot prepare a tool just like that. You need to sort of verify, validate the tool. Yeah. So right now, if you are looking at standardization in uniformity of application, it would be an ICOM tool. And if not, if you could sort of develop it on your own, it needs to be sort of validated, and there needs to be a multi-centered approach on this tool analysis to validate it. A single center and just modifying it may not be a PROM and PREM application.
And I think the second question also comes from this. It depends on data collection, duration, and frequency. Depends on the tool what we are selecting.
No, all the tool, you will have to have data for 1 to 2 years. It's a longitudinal follow-up. That's how you could relate that there is a success in CA breast surgery followed by a hormone therapy or a TKR, THR. If you don't follow up and if the patient post-discharge is anxious and depressed, you have not selected the case appropriately. You are not counseled, and those were not rational treatment offered. So the duration is a done deal. So every patient have to be followed for 1 to 2 years.
Okay. So is there any generic PROM tool which can be used across horizontally? This is my question.
No.
Okay. Because
so it has to be a validated tool.
Yeah.
There's
only
one
the standardization
would
come in.
There's one question on the Q&A chat. I'll just read it, Rashmi. Is there any specific sample size specification for generalizing the outcome measures in PROM?
So the National Institute of Clinical Excellence, UK, have said 50, which is sort of simple, doable. But you also need to sort of look at your universe of case on that particular year and then select according to the table which comes in, which would be at the 95% confidence interval. So you could select either.
Okay, I think Most of the question we have taken. The last question, how do you use a statistical tool to validate?
So there is no big statistics in this. It is basically looking at your activity, your EQ, 5D, 5L, your quality of life analysis, recreation. Within recreation, there will be close to 6 to 8 questions. So, and then you assess, and there is no statistics application in this. It is just a basic usual data analysis.
Thank you, sir. That was a very informative session, and definitely, I mean, the way you have covered everything, the importance, and you've given us various tools.